Hello, and I am Lee Butler, the president of the Iliff School of Theology, and I'm welcoming you to this conversation that has emerged from some concerns that have come out of this community on how we ought to think about investments. Given some of the crises that we're experiencing around the world, there's always this question of, are we being socially responsible in our investments? What are the standards by which we are making investments? And for this conversation, I'm welcoming Meredith Wilson Parfait, who is an alumna of Iliff. She's also earned a MBA from the Kellogg School of Management. And so we're delighted to welcome you to this conversation, especially since you are a board member of the Iliff School of Theology, and not just a board member, you're serving as the vice chairperson of Iliff. And so welcome, and we're looking forward to what you can share with us on investments and how we need to think about investing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'm really delighted that you have chosen to be with us in this way, because you are serving as the vice chair of our board of trustees, but more importantly, you were a student here. And so you have that experience of not just being a student, but being an Iliff student, and knowing the kinds of commitments that have been stated that we maybe have not lived into completely. And so you're able to speak out of a broad-based experience, but speak specifically and directly to this community. So with that in mind, talk to us about investments 101. I'm still learning. Our students want to learn, especially given that we are preparing leaders for a world in need of people who have conscience, who are spiritual and committed to bringing about transformation. So, investments 101 for the person who is committed to social transformation and social justice.
I love that question. One of the things that I loved about my Iliff experience was that it was a laboratory for spiritual formation. That it wasn't a set of, once you learn this, you're baked, you're finished, you're all done. And I think actually that's the mindset, the same mindset that we would take to social justice questions is actually the same mindset to take to investing. That there's no one way to do things, and there's no perfect answer. And that the spiritual journey is the asking the questions about how do we move this forward versus saying, oh, if we just divested this way, or if we just invested this way, then we've got it. Social justice asks us those questions. Social decolonialization asks us those questions. Identity, power, vocation, community asks us those questions. And that's what we're doing within a portfolio. And if you've sat in a class at Iliff, you know that most people don't agree on those big issues in a perfect way, even though we're all trying to push each other forward. And I think it's the same kind of graceful, complicated discourse that's necessary about any investment choice. That we, in my finance life, you would say we're just making kind of, numbers-based decisions. But actually, they're very human decisions, right? How we make these investments are about our values, they're about our point of view, where we're located, what we want out of them. And again, it's about making hard trade-offs. We make hard trade-offs in the world of social justice. We make hard trade-offs as we wrestle with issues of race or issues of moving our country forward, issues of politics. Those are the same formation kind of things that we do in a portfolio.
Fascinating. So you're not just thinking about making money.
No.
Especially when you're living in an institution like Iliff that is stressed for money.
No, we wouldn't have the Iliffian values if it was just about making money. And actually, one of the things I would push back on just capitalism is, in general, is they want to describe it as this rational set of choices, that we all make efficient markets. Markets are not efficient. They have people inside them, and people are inefficient making human choices. At Iliff, we're trying to make aware human choices and look at the costs of these decisions. And so when we look at the investments, we look at what are the costs of those, both what does it cost us to invest, what does it cost to make one choice over another, and to know that in certain instances, if we, for instance, decided to pull out a certain type of investment from the portfolio, that may mean we make more expensive investment choices, or it might mean we sacrifice returns. We may deliberately do that, but knowing that our entire budget is also tied to some of those endowment dollars may mean down the road we have to cut actual programs. So there's no rubric that gives you all the things you want. That doesn't exist. And so I think it requires this level of nuance and some agonizing and a sense that, okay, it's really important to us to pull out this subcategory of investments. What that may mean is liquidating out of pretty inexpensive index funds, which is part of the portfolio today. An index fund is a basket of the market. So it's the idea that instead of investing in one stock at a time, you're saying, if I could invest in every stock that's in this category in one very inexpensive vehicle, what would that look like? So an index fund allows you to inexpensively get the diversification that you need, which is good for a small endowment like Iliff's. If we said, okay, we want to pull things out of that because we don't like how the index is formed, it might make us make individual stock choices. That is inevitably more expensive from an investment management standpoint, which may decrease our returns, which may mean we cut actual dollars from the budget. So it's like Jenga. You don't know which one you're pulling out.
Right. And so you have said investment portfolio, and you've said endowment. What makes up an investment portfolio? You've identified index, but it also sounds like you're saying that the index is one thing and an investment portfolio, index may be included in that, but it's not its total.
Yep, that's a good question. So the endowment is the name of the bucket. It's a legal category that allows us to keep our tax-free status. That's what they call us because we're nonprofit. It's great because it means when the stocks or the bonds or whatever the portfolio does, what returns we get off of that, we don't pay taxes on it, which allows us to kind of not say, okay, if we earned 5%, now we earned 3% because we paid 2% to the federal government. So it's great. So the endowment is the structure, the legal structure. The portfolio is the way we compose those different stocks and cash and bonds, and that's the decisions we make about allocation. So allocation is the percentages of all these different risk types that we put in together to build the total portfolio. Inside the portfolio then are the individual categories. Stocks are a category. Inside of stocks is a category called index funds. So it's this micro, teasing apart this big bucket called the endowment that's constructed of percentages of different allocations, that's constructed of categories like stocks and bonds, that's made up of individual holdings that are the actual things that we buy. And in our case, we use index funds a lot, both for equity exposure and then indexes of bonds too. So it's groupings for us because we need the diversification. Because if we were buying them individually, we're not big enough to buy the whole market. If we had $1 billion, maybe we could, but we're not big enough. And so we want to be broadly diversified because that makes our risk go down, generally.
This isn't very complicated necessarily, but what you just described is really quite complex. Yeah. How do we move forward within this complexity, within a world that is so complex?
Again, I think that's where, for me, spiritual questions come in everywhere. I mean, I often say we try and create like work and life balance, but we're just humans living in every setting that we show up in. And so as Iliffians, our job is to bring spiritual formation even into things like this and to ask hard questions about it. And so how do we think about it? We start asking hard questions as a part of interrogating the right path. There's no perfect. There's just beginning to move towards things that are better. So one of the questions again is, why do we want this broad diversification? Because one of the ways they measure risk is volatility, right? Mm-hmm. Stocks go up, stocks go down. Markets, you want to buy more, you want to sell less, that moves your markets up and down. Or the federal government raises interest rates. Well, that makes your bond portfolio go down. So you see this variability come in. What's complicated for Iliff is, or any endowment, is we have to spend off of a budget. We don't know what the markets are going to do. The more diversification we have, the less volatility we have, which is great, because what we don't want to do is say, we've allocated $1 of expenses. Oh, but our portfolio went down by 50%, so we can only spend 50 cents. Because those are real programs on the ground that Iliff actually needs. It's faculty, it's staff, it's internship programs, it's admissions, it's all the things, right? It's running the chapel. So what we want is that diversification so that we don't get the volatility, because we have to be able to budget. So again, it's about, okay, we have kind of nuts and bolts questions and spiritual formation around that. And we're kind of trying to do both.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
And for your commitment to Iliff.
You know that this place means a lot to me, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mm.